just an FYI, Mitzi is going to be doing a presentation, and I just suggest, and then we're going to have some time for Q&A. If you do kind of want to keep a running list of your questions, feel free to pop them in the chat and I'll keep track of them. But we'll kind of run this. I'll defer to Gary when we get to that piece, but kind of task force style where I'll help out if we want to if people have questions and we want to make sure we have time for everyone. So with that, I think it's over to Lorene.
Hi, everybody. So I'm stepping in because Lisa's out with her husband for his birthday. So we'll have to remember to say happy birthday when we see her. We were getting a whole lot of questions, Lisa and I, from different people about the makeup of the new library board and a lot of things that we had no idea how to answer. So we put that over to Catherine and the crew and came up with this meeting. So with that, I'll put it off to Catherine.
Thank you, Lorraine. The only thing I have to add on that is that we just thought this was a good time to get everybody up to speed. Everybody could have the same knowledge about what's going on with the formation of the library board, as well as some of the financial questions that people have had. And, you know, it's an optional meeting, so we've got 7 members. I think that's a good turnout. And we also thank you for doing this in the middle of the day and right back to back before a task force meeting. So thanks for being here. And we've only got an hour, so let's just, Mitzi's gonna jump into a presentation. And I also wanna thank Gary and Michael for being here from the Gladstone Library Board. Of course, we've got other members from the library board here. We've got Natalie and Margaret, Libby. Is Libby here? No.
I don't see Libby.
And then Nancy also has had quite a few questions, and maybe she'll pop in later. So thank you, everybody.
Did you want me to start, Catherine?
Yeah, please.
Okay. So I put together a PowerPoint presentation just to kind of go over the transition of actually both library boards, the Oak Lodge Library Board and the Gladstone Library Board, and just a basic understanding of why library boards are important and their function. So give me just a minute here to try to share my screen.
Could I interrupt there, Mitzi, for a moment?
Yes.
I wonder if we should start off with a little explanation of the special committee that was set up between the 2 library boards to explore this.
I think that'd be great.
Maybe you
mind
could
talking about that?
Stop screen sharing for just a second, Mitzi,
yes,
while Gary talks. That's my fault. I forgot that. We also, you know, our 2 special guests, Gary was going to help us put this in context with the special committee. So my fault. Go ahead, Gary.
It's okay. I just thought it would help to know what's been going on. I was contacted. I think everybody knows me. I'm the current chair of the Gladstone Library Board, and I'm a resident of the unincorporated area of the Gladstone service area. And I was contacted by Grover Bornefeld as the chair of the Oak Lodge Library Board. And he proposed that we have some discussions between the 2 library boards. So we settled on having 2 members from each of the library boards. From the Gladstone Library Board, it's myself and Michael Milch. From the Oak Lodge Library Board, it was Grover and Leslie, who's sitting right down there below me. So she can correct me when I say something out of turn here, but we arranged to have a Zoom meeting hosted by Mitzi. Thank you, Mitzi. We have held 2 of them so far. And each time we've reported back to our respective library boards as to where we're at. Excuse me. Anyway, we had discussed the formation of a new library board. We had discussed some of the particulars about meetings, and we also got into discussions about bylaws, a new set of bylaws. Mitzi's going to cover these things in her PowerPoint presentation. She's done a very good job. And we are scheduled to have yet another special committee meeting. And I would hasten to add that what we're doing is all following the constraints of the settlement followed by the new IGA between the county and Gladstone, both of which were approved by the respective governing bodies, the Board of County Commissioners for the county and the Gladstone City Council for the city of Gladstone. So these are the constraints that we are following in our discussions on exploring the new formation of a library board to cover the combined service areas. So I would add here a little bit. For me, this is all a repeat of history. As some of you know, I was involved way back when there was going to be a new library built in Gladstone to serve the two service areas back in roughly 2009, 2010. At that time, I was on the what was called the County Library Board. It's now the Oak Lodge Library Board. And I served as the liaison from the County Library Board to the Gladstone Library Board for a couple years. And we explored, at that point, combining the two library boards. So I have a phone that's going out of control here. Anyway, we had gotten into just this kind of discussion back 10 years ago. And so this is all deja vu for me. This was we thought going to happen. We thought we'd be in a new library in what's now the Gladstone Nature Park. And we'd gone through the planning stage and the design stage. And it was only when there was a vote from the citizens of Gladstone that put a stop to it. So we've sort of treaded water until we've gone through a number of cycles and gotten to the point where we're now moving ahead and building two new libraries instead of one combined library. But in any event, Mitzi's going to talk. I'm sure she's going to explain very well the financial aspects of this, the participants, the residents of the two areas, the makeup of the residents of the unincorporated area, the contributions, and also the planned funding for the two new libraries, how that's going to be accomplished. I would repeat what Allison said, that if in the presentation Mitzi does, that you have questions, that you sort of hold them back until the question and answer session. And I'm sure Michael's going to chip in there to help out, and Leslie. We will deal with, I think, all the concerns everybody has and try to address them. In any event, I think it's probably time for me to let Mitzi go ahead and do her presentation. Can't hear you, Mitzi.
Give me 1 second here to share the slides. Can everybody see this?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm going to go way back to the beginning. In 2008, Measure 3-310 was presented to citizens of Clackamas County to vote on whether or not they wanted to form a library district. Documentation for this ballot talked about the representation. If the district were to pass, the representation that would be required for library boards. It stated each of these libraries would be required to ensure representation of both city and unincorporated residents on their local library board. The measure passed and the library district was formed. 61% of voters approved formation of the Clackamas County Library District. Voters approved a permanent rate of 39 cents per thousand of assessed value. Library district currently includes all of Clackamas County except for Johnson City. 100% of collected funds are distributed to linked libraries, which is approximately $18.4 million in fiscal year 1920. So some of you may not have seen the Gladstone service area map. This is a depiction of the service area for Gladstone. And I wanted to point out that we have the city boundaries here in the southern part, and then we also have a fairly large unincorporated area here. So the total population is 21,432. Of that, 11,880 city residents, 9,552 unincorporated residents. The library district revenue is approximately 736,000, and as part of the settlement agreement, the city of Gladstone has agreed to contribute 200,000 annually. The city of Gladstone, the Gladstone Library, when operated with Clackamas County, has a total of 4.5 permanent full-time employees and 0.85 on-call staff that we use on a part-time basis. This is a map of the Oak Lodge service area. There's no city within these boundaries. It's 100% unincorporated. The total population is 31,858, and they're all unincorporated. The library district revenue is approximately 1.3 million. The Oak Lodge reserves, the amount of money that the library's been saving since the district was formed, is 3.5 million. And then the capital reserve is 1 million. Oak Lodge has 4.5 permanent full-time employees and 2.5 on-call part-time. So the reason I put this slide together is I've heard a lot of comments from some of the citizens that they feel like that since the city is contributing an extra 200,000 a year, that they felt like that the contributions are not fair, and that because of that there should be a larger representation. But I wanted to point out that if you look at the combined population, the city of Gladstone residents make up 22% of that combined population. And when you look at their contributed revenue, they make up 23% of that combined revenue. And the Gladstone unincorporated residents, they make up 18% of that combined population. And the revenue that they contribute makes up 18% of that total revenue if you were adding Oak Lodge and Gladstone together. Oak Lodge is, second here, I've got a problem with Siri on my screen here. Not sure how to get rid of that. Okay, it's gone. Oak Lodge, when you makes up 60% of the combined population and contributes 59% of the combined revenue. This slide represents projections for the projects that we're working on, the new library for Oak Lodge and the new library for Gladstone. We're estimating if we go forward with some of the popular options that we've seen so far, we're estimating it's going to be 17 million total for both libraries. And there's a range there in case there's another option that's selected by the community. So the range would be approximately 17 million to 21 million for both libraries. We're estimating that Gladstone's library is going to cost approximately 4.9 million and Oak Lodge approximately 12 million. So how do we plan on paying for this? We're going to throw Oak Lodge's reserves and their capital contribution into the pot. And we also plan on borrowing some money that the library will pay on, similar to like a mortgage. And then the most important part of this, I think, is really more important than any of these other figures I brought up because of the benefit. Given there's a funding gap here, Clackamas County has agreed to contribute approximately $8 million to $12 million to make sure that we are able to complete these projects. If we didn't have this contribution from Clackamas County, we would not be able to move forward. We would have to go to the residents to ask for more money, to ask the residents to tax themselves. We are not doing that. Clackamas County has agreed to make up the difference, and this is a great benefit to both communities. So City of Gladstone and the Board of County Commissioners worked together and negotiated an intergovernmental agreement, and they completed this and executed the document on November 14th, 2019. In that IGA, they mandate that the Gladstone Library Advisory Board will dissolve within 1 year, and the new library board will include proportionate membership. Now, this is a little tricky here because early on when staff was preparing how this was going to work with the task force, in good faith, we put together a charter that outlined the charge of this task force. Staff put it together, it was approved by the BCC, and then later, as I already stated, a year later in November of 2019, this intergovernmental agreement was put into place that supersedes this charter that was created. The IGA, and I did talk to our legal counsel, we were told that the IGA does take legal precedence over the charter. So, and this is where I'll go ahead and read from the charter, what we had put in there originally in good faith, not knowing how this was going to come about. The charter does say to evaluate best practices for library governance and make recommendations on the future role of the Gladstone Library Advisory Board. So this slide here, it's an excerpt from the IGA so that you can see the specific paragraphs that mandate how we're going to handle this new library board. And the thing that I need to point out here is that it states here in yellow, the library board shall include proportionate membership for the unincorporated portion of the Oak Lodge Library Service Area, the unincorporated portion of the Gladstone Library Service Area, and the City of Gladstone. There's one other part in the IGA that talks about the existing current Gladstone Library Board, and this is still an excerpt from the IGA. Gladstone City Council shall complete the dissolution of the Gladstone Library Board within 1 year of signing this agreement. I'm going to need to move you so I can see this PowerPoint.
Keep the car on so you can continue to listen. I mean, when we get home.
Okay. So I thought it might be helpful to talk about some of the responsibilities that are given to the library board. We expect them to review and understand the library's budget and funding sources, recommend adoption of annual budget to Clackamas County Budget Committee, speak publicly to promote and establish support for library services and programs, recommend proposed policy statements or necessary revisions. When challenged, decide if identified materials are banned from the library collection, become familiar with issues affecting the library and possibly undertake work towards agreement and resolution, work on campaigns or elections that benefit the library, work with library director on development of strategic plan and mission statement, develop working familiarity of the Oregon Library Association public library standards and work to ensure the library meets all essential indicators. Work on committees that relate to library issues, such as the Library District Advisory Committee, LDAC, and the Library District Task Force. Review and interview and recommend member appointments. Now, I do want to point out here that this is a current function that the current Gladstone Library Board does not have. I do also want to point out the initial recruitment for the new library board will be handled by Clackamas County. After that's established, then the recruitment process is handled by the library board, well, overseen by Clackamas County, but the library board reviews the applications, they interview potential members, and they make recommendations for final appointments to the BCC. And the last note that I have here is that of one of the library responsibilities, and this is in the IGA, prepare and present quarterly report to the Gladstone City Council. So here are some recent actions that we've seen from the library board, so you can get a sense of what types of things that they're doing and deciding or recommending. One recent thing is they recommended adoption of the fiscal year 2021 library budget. They recommended a change to the public internet policy, increasing daily maximum usage to 3 hours at both libraries. Recommend a change to the community room policy to require a reservation for groups of 8 or more and at least 2 hours before start time. And they've recently elected officer positions, chair and vice chair. As Gary talked about, we did put together a library subcommittee to meet and talk about what they would like to see in this new library board. We had 2 members from the Gladstone Library Board, Gary Bukowski and Michael Milch, and we had 2 members from the Oak Lodge Library Board, Leslie Shirk and Grover Bornefeld. We've met twice to date. We were collaborating to provide bylaw recommendations for the new library board. And part of what we decided to do with this library group is to have the 2 members go back to their respective library boards and talk about the proposed recommendations. The subcommittee did come up with a recommendation. They've recommended that we have a 5-member library board, 3 members appointed to represent the Oak Lodge Library Service Area, 1 member appointed to represent the City of Gladstone boundary, 1 member appointed to represent the unincorporated portion of the Gladstone Library Service Area. They've also recommended that we have 2 non-voting liaisons, 1 member appointed to represent Gladstone Library Service Area community interests, and 1 member appointed to represent Oak Lodge Library Service Area community interests. And this final bullet here, or the 3rd bullet, does come from the IGA, 2 members from each library appointed to the Library District Advisory Committee. They've also specified how they would like to handle the officers. They would like there to be 2 officers, a chair and a vice chair, 1 officer drawn from the Oak Lodge Library Service Area, 1 officer drawn from the Gladstone Library Service Area, with the chair and the vice chair jointly establishing the agendas for the meetings. They are asking Clackamas County to be a part of this initial recruitment process. They'd like to have 4 members included, 2 members from the Gladstone Library and Library Board and 2 members from the Oak Lodge Library Board. They're also recommending staggered terms for new appointments, and that the meeting locations, when we're finally able to meet physically face-to-face, that they'll rotate between the 2 branches. So what are the next steps? The Gladstone Library Board will meet again on a special meeting this Monday on August the 24th to discuss these bylaw recommendations. Then we will collect final recommendations from both library boards. County Council will have to review the bylaws to ensure that we're in compliance with the settlement agreement, the IGA, with other Clackamas County Advisory Board, to make sure that we're consistent with what we typically have with a county advisory board. After that, the BCC will approve the bylaws. The recruitment will begin, and we are planning on there being library board members included, the 4 members I mentioned earlier. There will be applications, there will be interviews, and then recommendations made to the BCC. The BCC will appoint new members, and then at that point, both library boards will be dissolved and we will begin this new library board. I wanted to make it clear that the current members of Oak Lodge are also, their terms are being expired, and we are starting fresh from both groups. Current members are able to apply and welcome to apply, but they'll have to go through the application process and be interviewed. Now we're at the question section. Does anybody have a question?
I have a clarification.
Yes.
On the slide where you have the funding, there are two bonds. One is for the $310,000. Oh, it's $310,000 per year. As that's the line item. That's the bond that was going to be one that is responsible for the library to repay out of our budget.
Right, and I want to clarify, this is a revenue bond that Clackamas County will take out. This does not require any additional votes from any community members or any additional taxes. It was part of the settlement agreement to help make the difference to be able to pay for these buildings.
Okay, and the gap one is the one that the county is picking up.
Right.
My other clarification in the two slides that you showed with the maps of the service area, then when you talk about you refer to it as the library district when I think it should say library service area. The one area that I noted that you did that was in the reserves. One time it was referred to as library district reserves when it should have said library service area.
Yeah, on the PowerPoint that went out to everyone, it did still say the library district reserves. I changed it on the one I just presented. If you're talking about the cost and funding page, I wanted to make it clear that those were Oak Lodge Library reserves that will be contributed to the pot.
All right, I reviewed the presentation and I guess I didn't notice that it had been changed on you.
Yeah, I had to change it after it had already gone out.
Because you know that I would bring it up.
Yes, yes.
You heard my comment.
One more time, I want to say one more time, I feel like it's a moot point given that Clackamas County has offered to pay for the gap in the funding here to complete these projects. It's basically a moot point where the money's coming from when you look at the details up until that point. Any other questions? Does anybody from the Gladstone Library have a question?
Yeah, Beverly, go ahead.
I see where we're only going to have one member on the library board, and that is what Clackamas County Library District has decided.
This is the recommendation from the subcommittee. What is in the IGA that's been decided for us is that there will be proportionate representation. So that means that if we increase the number of people on the library board, we still have to make it proportional to the population.
Well, it wouldn't do any good for Gladstone to increase the number of board members if we still only have one. My feeling is that Gladstone will have little or no say going forward. That was just my comment.
Well, Beverly, if we made the board 10 members, Gladstone would have 2.
Well, I realize that. That's what I said. It wouldn't make any difference. If you increase the number, the percentage is still going to be not fair.
Well, I wouldn't say it's unfair, it's proportionate, which...
Yeah, but it means basically we have no say.
Well, you do. You have a member there who has equal time with anybody else to speak.
But if it comes
A member.
member, that's what I was getting at, a member.
This is where I think it's very important that the 4 members that will be a part of the recruitment process, that they be actively involved to make sure that they can select people that can work together and not just see separately the Gladstone Library and the Oak Lodge Library, but to see us as one, and that can truly work together and contribute in a positive way. It's going to be very important that we select the right members.
It seems to me that if you're going to try and select the right members, boy, you have to go to Gladstone.
Todd, I don't really understand that comment. Can you clarify?
Well, the city of Gladstone has been diminished by this entire process. the library is usually a contact point between the city government and the people. And we don't, and it's the most important contact point. The city has lost that. So how are we going to relate to the citizens of Gladstone?
Michael, would you like to talk about some of your ideas?
Yeah, because there are two things here going on. One is the formation of a library board that would, advisory board that would relate to the county commissioners for library.
They've done a very poor job in recognizing Gladstone.
Well, let me finish, Todd, please. Two different things going on. One board is the county is overseeing this one library with two different facilities, and the county is establishing a board to govern that. But the task that was given to the Gladstone task force that you're all a part of was to recommend what the future role of the Gladstone Library Advisory Committee would be. That's the board that does relate the library to the city council within Gladstone. Now, under the IGA, that board could just fade off into the sunset and disappear. But what we'd like to hear from you all, you've been focusing, I know, mostly on facility related issues, is to see if there is a role within the city of Gladstone for an advisory committee to the city council that would relate to the kinds of services that the library provides and how that relates to the community. So what you're saying we're missing out on still needs to happen. And if you have recommendations, not so much on facility matters, but more on program matters, how the library relates to the parks in the community, how it relates to the schools in the community, how it relates to the senior community, where we have a senior center. All those are services that Gladstone City provides, and the library could play an important role in providing those services to the citizens of Gladstone. But it's not something for the county to oversee. It's something for the citizens of Gladstone to have a role in. So it may be that when you get to fulfilling this part of the charter, recommending a role of the future role of what's now the Library Advisory Board for Gladstone, you may come up with a recommendation for some kind of a community services advisory board that would include the library and other related community services to provide exactly that kind of connection that you're talking about.
Right. So we can't just go,
So
I don't know
Michael,
that you'd want to put a countywide board in charge of Gladstone related issues. I think you still want a Gladstone level board for that, but they would not be responsible for the kinds of library administration that was described in the slideshow.
Michael, am I hearing you correctly that you are suggesting that the Gladstone Library Task Force recommend creating a city library task force to work in conjunction with the city regarding library programs, etc.?
I would just change the wording a little bit. The task force was charged with that responsibility for the future of recommending what the future of the current, what we call Gladstone Library Advisory Committee is. It would not be a task force. It would be another kind of an advisory committee to the city council. Not all city council members are well versed in library related issues.
Correct.
Or park related issues or senior center administration issues. That's why we have these advisory committees that help to advise them in shaping policy. But the library has traditionally had a connection to all these communities. We could be doing story times in our park facilities. We sometimes do food collection for the food pantry at the library. There are a lot of community services that are exclusive to the city of Gladstone that the library has played a part in the past. So it would be helpful to have some kind of a group. Now, it may have much more to do with than just the library. We may want representatives from the food pantry, representatives from the school district or something else. That's up to you to decide. But the idea is that at the local level, the county library in our community is going to be a great resource for a variety of community services, not just the collection of books and CDs and DVDs and ebooks, but more for all the rest of the programs and things that the library can offer a community.
So it sounds like as a task force, we need to put something on the agenda then in the future to recommend creating this advisory committee for Gladstone representation, working with the city and the county on library programs, etc. Is that correct?
Well, again, you wouldn't have a role in shaping the county level library board.
Right.
At
It
the
would.
local level, you would have, you could have
Okay.
a role in shaping this, because the Gladstone Library Advisory Board will disappear. It'll be dissolved in mid-November of this year. Now, you don't
Okay.
have to replace it right away. You could take a little time and work this out, because I know you're focused on facilities right now. That's been the primary focus of your work. But this was the one kind of non-facility related charge given to you in the charter for the establishment of this task force. And at some point, you'll have a little more time when some other issues are settled on facilities and you're just waiting for things to be completed. You'll probably have time to delve into this a little more deeply.
I think this might have slipped through the cracks a little bit, at least for me. So maybe Catherine, or Allison, we can get just maybe a note at the next meeting. I don't know if it's probably this one coming up, but to discuss in the future about creating this advisory committee, I think.
My question is, though, would this advisory committee be able to have any influence on the library board that's controlling the two libraries?
I would add something to that. Before we forget it, Mitzi pointed out that one of the recommendations of the special committee of the two library boards was that at least during the construction phase of the two libraries, there would be a liaison from both the unincorporated area of Oak Lodge and from Gladstone to the newly formed combined library. Now, they wouldn't have voting rights, but they would certainly have a voice, and there would be then 2 people from Gladstone out of 7 who would be able to speak to any of the issues that concern Gladstone. So there will be 2 people. It's not like 1 person.
In other words, the board will, up until the completion of both libraries, there will be 7 members, 2 from Gladstone and 1 from Gladstone City, 1 from Gladstone Unincorporated, another from that combined area. So there'd be kind of a 3-4 split between the Gladstone service area and the Oak Lodge service area.
I'd like to say something about the idea of the library board. Beverly, you used the word control the library. The library board doesn't control the library. That's why we have a library director. People come to the library and say they need these kind of services. The library board doesn't get involved in that. We get involved in interaction with the county and the budget and those kind of things. But the day-to-day operations, which is really what I think that you're trying to address, is the library. One of the examples that she gave for what it is that we approved was the additional number of hours to be able to use the computers, if I remember correctly. That came from the community. That came from input to the librarians. And it was a policy that we had at the library that we didn't really make. It was a library policy, and we were just asked to comment on it and approve. but that all came from the citizens. That was brought to us by the library. So we don't control the library. We're advocating for the library and the things, especially in financial areas. So,
well, I realize all of that. I was on the library board for Gladstone for 4 years, and was a liaison between the library board and the foundation, who we have raised money for many years for the library. So I'm aware of all of that. It's just back to the same thing, that if there are decisions to be made going forward, Gladstone will have little or no say in it. And that's all I'm pointing out, because of it goes back to the same thing. We end up with a much smaller library than what we wanted. We're ending up with less representation. And it's just that's just expressing my concerns.
But Lanny, why don't you go ahead?
Well, it sounds to me from this discussion that this whole thing is basically written in stone, that there really isn't any room for negotiation or change. Is that correct? I'm talking about the numbers of representations. It sounds like this is the way it is, folks, and just suck it up. Yes or no?
We do have to have proportionate representation. The input that you could provide would be the information, the details in the bylaws, the number of members, some of these things that we detailed. That's what you're able to provide input.
Okay, so it's written in stone. That was my question. Back in the very beginning.
Proportionate.
Okay, that's what I wanted to know.
Proportionate representation is in the IGA that was negotiated between the City of Gladstone and the Board of County Commissioners, and it does take legal precedence and supersedes the charter.
Okay.
Let me add, I think it was important that the charts you showed that the proportions of financial contribution were approximately equal to the population proportion. The IGA, when it said proportionate membership, it didn't specify proportion to the population. When Metro does a housing, or maybe it did, you didn't quote that word in the slide, but like when Metro did a housing bond a year or two ago, they collect taxes for affordable housing throughout the Metro region, and because Clackamas County makes up 21% of the assessed property value of the Metro region, Clackamas County gets exactly 21% of the funds raised for affordable housing. So that kind of proportional application of funding is based on tax assessment. So here we're really using two things at once. We're using two factors that happen to coincide pretty closely with one another: proportional to the population, proportional to the source of the funding supporting the program.
Okay, so it sounds like they get to choose the definition of proportionate.
It was negotiated in the IGA.
So I'm curious if folks have more questions, but it seems like there's a couple of things that are sort of emerging, and I maybe want to recap some of this. So in terms of the library board, and please correct me if I'm wrong, Mitzi, and I think this is kind of to Lanny's point, some of these things regarding the makeup of the library board for Gladstone and Oak Lodge when they come together have already been negotiated as part of the IGA between Clackamas County and the City of Gladstone. The Gladstone Library Task Force does have in its charter some language around making recommendations on governance, which could be the library board, but there are some parameters that are already in place in terms of what's been negotiated in the IGA. Sounds like Michael is raising the possibility that the task force could make a recommendation to the Board of County Commissioners on a Gladstone advisory body that would really work to looking at coordinating community services across the city for things like, and where the library would be a part of that, coordination between the senior center, the library, food pantry, those kinds of things that might not fall under the purview of the library board, but would be an additional way for Gladstone to make sure that that library is integrated into the services of the city and the other functions. Is that sort of what you were suggesting, Michael?
The only correction I would make to that is this would be an advisory board to the Gladstone City Council, but to the extent that it would involve the county, it would relate to county library staff. Mitzi had indicated to us as a library board much earlier in the year that she would still like some Gladstone community input on some of the operations and features of the Gladstone Library itself. So rather than having only a county-wide board, it would be helpful to have some involvement at the community level. The library has in the past participated in the Gladstone Community Festival in the summertime. They have, gone into the schools and provided some programs. Those are community, city-related connections, and we want to preserve those connections without trying to usurp the role of the overall county-level library board.
Okay, thank you for that. So I'm looking around the room and I'm noting task force members, we've worked together for a long time, and some of your nonverbal body language that I'm seeing right now indicates there's maybe some discomfort. Maybe folks are not so happy. I'd like to ask maybe two questions, Gary, if it's okay with you. I know that this is really kind of your meeting, but I'm wondering what really, Beverly, you started to talk about this, and I think use some of this language of feeling like Gladstone won't have a voice. But I'm wondering if there are additional concerns that people have, and maybe even if there's, just to get those out there, what are some of your concerns? Is it really that you're not going to have a proportional voice? Because maybe we can talk about governance and how the board has in the past or would continue to make decisions. Are you a consensus-based body? So if Gladstone says no, it's not going to fly, or is it majority? I'm not sure. Those might be helpful things to talk about in this space. Or if this is a useful space for people to talk about some of these additional recommendations. There are some things it sounds like that are already, to use Lanny's words, set in stone, but there are other opportunities that the task force could have to make recommendations. So I kind of want to open it up just maybe for potential brainstorming, but also what are really your concerns? And Lorene, go ahead.
Well, I think some of this is a little bit of fear because we have two different libraries, but we're coming together. And so that's a paradigm shift, which is uncomfortable to a lot of people. And so I think Mitzi was right. It really does depend on who is on that board, so that we don't see the silos, that we're seeing the merging of the two, so that Gladstone doesn't have to fear that Oak Lodge is going to power over them and they wouldn't get services because we're together. Does that make sense? Like we need a mission statement or something.
Well, and one of the things that I was questioning, because as a member of the foundation, and Lanny's a member of the foundation, and so is Margaret, and all of us have been very involved in the library all along. We've been involved in raising money for this future new library, and we've raised money all along for programs at the library and have had some say in what kind of programs we funded at the library. And I'm just wondering if any of this is going to be able to continue this relationship. We had a liaison member on the library board from the foundation. And is that something that's possible in the future so we can be involved?
So Natalie, I see your hand, but I'm curious if that's something that Mitzi, or I'm not sure who can answer about that relationship between the Gladstone Library Foundation and the future board.
I'm not sure exactly how we will handle what's happening on the library board and how it relates to the foundation, but the first part of your question, we can absolutely, I've been attending all of your meetings. I know what you want to do with the funds that you're raising. you can designate what you would like to do with that money when you're donating it specifically to the Gladstone Fund. And we can work together to make sure that we're providing the programming with that money in the way that you had intended. I'm not sure how to answer the part about how the foundation would relate to the library board. We could have, if we wanted to, we could maybe quarterly invite the president from the foundation and maybe the president from the Friends, just to give a report on the state of their affairs and the types of fundraisings that they're having and any need that they may have. We could certainly build that in to make sure that that relationship is there, but we haven't determined that yet.
Mitzi, I remember that we did have a short conversation. I believe that it was in the special meeting with these guys and Grover, where we said the funder gets to choose. So we have the same situation with the Friends, and also we get that donation from that other that person who wants his money to be spent on science fiction. And that's a perfect example. He's giving us money and he wants it to be spent on a particular thing. And either we don't take it because, but the funder gets to choose. If you give money for some reason, nobody gets to make a different decision. So
Okay, do you get to use city property to raise the money to spend on what?
Say that again?
I think Todd might be frozen.
Yes.
But I believe Lanny wanted, Natalie, I see you and I want to be sure that we get to you, but I think Lanny wanted to respond directly to some questions on the foundation, and I'm not sure if Gary also wanted to say something there. Todd's back. We missed part of your comment, Todd, but I'm going to go over to Lanny. Lanny, did you have something you wanted to say?
Yeah, would it be possible for the foundation and the Oak Lodge Friends to have a non-voting member be a part of the board as on a regular basis to attend all the meetings, even though they're non-voting? Is that a possibility?
Well, the meetings are open to anybody.
Well, I realize that, but would it be possible for them to sit at the table and be a part of the group even though they're not voting?
Well, I don't think that it's up to the board to decide that. I think it's up to the bylaws.
Mitzi, is that something that you
could we as a group recommend that we do something like that? Could we ask for that as a group? I'm just tossing this out. I think it would make people feel a little more involved.
Whatever.
I don't see a problem with it, but I would, I'd want to take it to both library boards.
Right,
and,
of course.
Maybe first a subcommittee to have them vetted out. Or again, we could just invite, if you don't want to be coming every month, we could invite you however often we establish, quarterly, every 6 months, however often is appropriate. We could invite the president of the foundation, president of the Friends, to come give us a report so that we know that we're up to date with what's happening with both organizations.
Well, I'd like to see it go both ways.
I'm not opposed to adding a non-voting member, but I would want the input from the subcommittee and the library boards.
Sure.
So we only have a few more minutes. I want to pass it over to Natalie for your question or comment, and then to Todd.
Thank you. Can everyone hear me?
Sure can.
Okay. I've said this numerous times, and I guess I was just in hopes that both separate library boards would have met more frequently, because when we first started out with this process, it was to be one library, 2 branches. And I feel like we're getting separation, and we're getting more division than we are uniting. And I think it would have been, I would have hoped that both boards would have sat down and said, okay, we know we have this IGA and it states this, but as a group, can we recommend or ask the Clackamas County Board of Commissioners if we can have some strong input as to how we want to set this up? Because we're really right now looking at 2 separate libraries and I don't see any joining. I see division, and that disturbs me. And I just, again, I'm disappointed. I thought we were going to work closer together, and we're getting division here as opposed to working as just one body. And I know by thinking that you're going to have, you know, a 5-member board, that there's going to be unification. But I don't think that's fair how it's set up, because I believe in it being really equitable, because we're supposed to be one library. But I know what it states in the IGA. I don't care for it. I will respect it, but I just think we could have approached this a little bit differently to have a more balanced body to govern our libraries. That's all I
Natalie,
have.
Natalie, I see this as our first step in trying to become united and to make joint decisions. Right now, we are operating the Gladstone Library, but yet we have this this gray area where we don't really have Gladstone citizens on the official board. And you know, we're at the situation where we need to jointly put a mission statement together, jointly work on a strategic plan, and start building this relationship. I see this as the first step to uniting together. And we desperately—
I hear what you're saying, but the bodies aren't fair amounts, in my opinion. That's just my opinion.
I feel like I need to make a comment here. And this is a sore point with me. I'll say that up front. Coming from the unincorporated portion of the Gladstone service area, I would say our 9,500 plus people have been totally ignored over the years by Gladstone. We've contributed 55% of the library operating fund for Gladstone. We represent about 45% of the population of the service area. Most of the time, we've had no representation on the library board, maybe one, whereas we're almost half of the total population of the service area. So how is it fair? You're worrying about now not getting equal recognition. You haven't given it to the unincorporated part of your service area for 11 years.
You could have joined the city.
We don't care to join the city. We are busy. We were put together with you, but not by choice.
Yeah, I know. You don't care to join the city.
We didn't get a vote. We don't get a vote in anything that Gladstone decides about the library. How's that fair?
Okay, now Gary, I respect your viewpoint, but how are Oak Lodge and Gladstone connected in the sense of, prior to all of this, you were your own separate governing body and had your own library board? I'm scratching my head going, how are we responsible for what you were going to get? Because we don't have any control over you. Clackamas County Board of Commissioners do. Gladstone never did.
No, Gary doesn't live in the Oak Lodge Library District. He lives in the Gladstone Library.
Right.
Okay.
Okay.
So I want to pause here. I saw a hand from Nancy. I know Todd's been waiting with his hand up, and we're also at 4:30. We have another meeting coming up soon that I know staff need a little bit of time to prepare for. But I think it's worth, I kind of look into Catherine. Is it okay for us to go maybe another 5? Is Catherine frozen? Is she there? Maybe another 5 minutes just to get some of these questions and queries out. And if we need to follow up with them, I think that's possible. But is it okay to go another 5 minutes, Catherine? Yes. I think you're muted. I can see you.
Oh, good. Okay, my space bar wasn't working. Yeah, I think it's fine. And I'd also like to hear if you would like to meet again to talk about some of these ideas that have come up today. And we could, if you feel like that's an appropriate use of your task force time. I would like to say, if I can interject now, is I would really like this topic not to interfere with the project. I don't want to slow down the project. I know you don't want to slow down the project. So, but we could have another optional meeting at a different time.
So I'm going to go over to Todd, and then I'm going to get Nancy.
Okay, I've been making a list of observations. First of all, a response to Gary's earlier comments, which is, you know, the Gladstone voted in what, 2009 for that board thing, or for to join the library, and But that was to stop a riot in the city. The city council had come up with this idea of putting a library up on top of the hill, and nobody in Gladstone wanted it there. So now we have a library brought down the hill. But the city not listening, or the government not listening to the citizens, is a kind of been a characteristic of Gladstone for the last, until an election ago. The city of Gladstone wasn't going to do anything, including incorporate unincorporated areas. That's just my observations on that. I don't remember why it was relevant. But the layers of bureaucracy involved with, you know, any functional changes, I thought it's kind of interesting. You announced that they're going to go 3 more hours on the internet service now. Well, you know, is this something that has to go through a library board or a decision process? Because, you know, that's the city. That's the city not being responsive, or the government not being responsive to the needs of citizens, because the citizens needed that a long time ago. And this pandemic has exacerbated that. I've seen photos recently of libraries that were putting boosted internet access up in front of parking places for people to come up and use. So we're kind of behind the curve on that.
So back to what you were originally talking about, our policies were actually the same. Book lodges and the Gladstone Library Board, we allowed 2 hours for people, maximum 2 hours every day. The Gladstone Library had a practice of not really following their policy and giving people guest passes and extending time, but it was done in an arbitrary way. Sometimes they would do it, sometimes they would not. And, you know, from a library perspective, we try very hard to treat all of our patrons the same. And this is why a policy is important, to help staff understand and to assist them in treating people equally. So we listened to the Gladstone community and we changed that policy to a maximum of 3 hours and talked about staff allowing exceptions if there were personal business that needed to be done, job applications, banking, resumes. But we changed that policy in response to the community from Gladstone. We did that in February. I presented it to the Oak Lodge Library Board January 23rd, presented it to the Gladstone Library Board February 4th. The policy was changed. We increased the hours to a maximum of 3.
And I believe you brought it before us to vote on it as well, as I recall.
We did. And in answer to your question of what we're doing now, people do have access to our Wi-Fi out in the parking lot. We did not have to boost anything. I realize this is not enough, but we are under special circumstances here with COVID. We do have laptops and hotspots available for checkout now. We are in the process of trying to get that marketed so people understand that they're available. We're doing what we can. I know it's not enough, but we are doing what we can under the circumstances.
Okay, I'm gonna bounce over to Nancy, who raised her hand. It might have been to a point made a couple of minutes ago, but go ahead, Nancy.
It was. I just wanted to thank Gary for bringing up those statistics about the unincorporated area. We forget about those numbers when we're talking about these things, but I really and truly feel we need at least 2 people from Gladstone, just because, you know, somebody could be tied up and not be able to make it to a meeting or whatever. However you configure the board, it's important for us to have a voice, a good, strong voice on it. Mitzi, you and I have talked about how the IGA has determined all of this, and IGAs and laws are never perfect. When they're written, people do the best that they can to get it all down on paper. Nobody ran it by us, because if they did, they never would have got it passed. And that's just the way it is. But I don't know any laws that don't have some concessions made after the fact when people realize that there's something not quite right about it. So I just want to put that out there. I still strongly, and a lot of people are going to have a problem with only one person on the board. And I think that's the last I want to say about it. Thank you.
Okay,
And
we're over.
I'd like to,
Go ahead, Mitzi, sorry.
I'd like to say that I know that we're going to have issues. You're asking us to disproportionately take away representation from one group to give it to another group so that it feels equal. And I'm telling you, we're going to have issues with those other taxpayers who want their full representation and deserve their full representation. We can't arbitrarily take that representation away and give it to another group.
That's why I wanted equal.
You look at your slide and study it. It just is amazing how it comes out that each of the different areas, the unincorporated Gladstone service area people, the city of Gladstone, that's 40%, and it comes out with the population as well as the funding. And it's exactly the same for the 60% population-wise and funding that comes with the Oak Lodge service area. So it's amazing that it came out that way, and it's beautiful that it came out that way because it's perfect. You can point to it and say everybody has equal representation from the population standpoint, and everybody has equal representation from the money standpoint. So I don't see how anybody can raise this as being unfair and inappropriate. I mean, even if it didn't say in the IGA that it should be proportional, proportionality comes out frequently in our governmental, how we do elections, how we're represented in our various governments. So it's not as if this is anything strange. And I think that it just, no gerrymandering here. This is the way it comes out, and it's proportional in two ways, and I don't think it could be any more clear that this is an excellent way to have the board be representative of the populations in the both services.
So Nancy, I can see that you're about to respond. We're about 10 minutes over. And Leslie, I thank you for your comments. And I also just want to recognize that what I'm seeing and hearing is some real discomfort from some of the task force members who are here today with this decision. And I think, Leslie, you're sharing some of the ways that you feel that this is very fair, and there are other folks in this conversation who do not feel it's fair. So I'm curious for some of the members here, there were a few ideas that were thrown out to potentially explore on ways to help this feel more fair for folks who are maybe experiencing some of that discomfort or have some real concerns, or some additional governance bodies that could be suggested to help fill some of these gaps. Does this group feel that it would be productive and important to continue this conversation outside of our task force meetings? And Catherine raises the point that the design process, to keep the master planning process moving, we have some real milestones ahead of us over the next couple of months. But it sounds like the project team is very happy to create space for more conversations. Do you feel that another conversation should be scheduled so we can pick this up? Because Nancy, I also totally cut you off before you were able to respond. And I think there might be more that folks feel like they need to say. If you feel like another conversation would be productive and helpful, if you can maybe give a little thumbs up or nod your head. I see one person, 2 people, 3 people, 4, 5. Okay, a couple of folks here seem like that would be helpful. So I think Catherine and Mitzi, you might be meeting with Gary to discuss this a little bit more, and maybe Lorene or Lisa, the chairs of these 2 bodies. But it seems like there's some interest in continuing the conversation. And also, I saw some nodding heads, but recognition that this might happen parallel or outside of our standing task force meetings for the master planning process. They're important and related, but we also want to make sure that those plans and those recommendations on the design still go forward and we don't lose time there. So folks, that might be a dissatisfying way to wrap up our conversation, but we do have we're going to be seeing each other in just a few minutes, so we need a little bit of time to prepare. We did not have anybody here for attending, so we're not going to have, I'm assuming we won't have any public comments because there's nobody here attending, so we can close that. But I'm actually going to look to Laureen, Gary, Catherine, if you have anything that you'd like to say kind of in closing. I think we'll be picking this up again soon. Yeah, Catherine.
Well, I want to, we had really good representation here from the task force. A lot of people, almost everybody showed up. So thanks for that. I do want to mention that there is a library board, Gladstone Library Board meeting. It's a special meeting, and it's, Mitzi, tell us when it is in case people want to attend. It's Monday.
August 24th, Monday, August 24th
Okay.
at 6:30 p.m. by Zoom. If anybody would like the invitation to join, just let me know. It's also posted on the city website.
Yeah. So, well, Michael wants to say something, but I also want to thank Michael and Gary for coming, and thank you for your time, as well as the rest of the task force. So, Michael, you had something
Just
you
an
want to say?
informational thing about a sort of a design milestone that has been reached. I want to let you know the Gladstone Planning Commission met last night and is voted to recommend to the City Council a change in the building code affecting the downtown area that will allow the new library to be built on the City Hall site without requiring it to have off-street parking. The City Hall never had off-street parking, the City Hall Police Station, and the library will not either. Now, that creates a concern in the community, of course, about where will library patrons park. So when this matter goes to the City Council, I hope that you, who are really involved in this process of designing this building, will encourage the City Council to make a quick recommendation as to where an appropriate location would be for community accessible parking that would serve library users and other people that travel to the downtown area. We've always talked as though the current library building would be the location of that, but that's never been officially decided. And I think we're getting to the place where we could ease a lot of people's minds if we kind of push for a decision on that.
Thank you.
Michael. Yeah.
Okay. I think we've got to wrap things up because we've got to get ready for our task force meeting. So we'll see most of you. Thank you, Gary. Thank you, Michael. Very soon.
5:30.
5:30. Go get a snack. We'll see you soon.
Okay.
Bye.